The wind carried the scent of death through the halls of Crimson Hollow. Theron Ravencrest stood at the window of his ruined keep, watching the storm gather over the mountains. Lightning split the sky in two, illuminating the valley below where his ancestors had once ruled with iron and fang. Now the villages lay empty. The fields had gone to seed. The watchtowers crumbled stone by stone, year after year, until they resembled broken teeth against the darkening horizon. 10 years. 10 years since he had killed his brother beneath the harvest moon. 10 years since his pack had scattered like leaves before a winter gale. 10 years since he had become the thing they whispered about in distant taverns. The fallen alpha, the beast of Ravencrest, the monster who wore a dead man's skin. He was 45 years old. Gray threaded through his black hair at the temples. Scars crossed his forearms and chest like a map of every battle he had survived. His knuckles were thick and calloused. His eyes, once bright with the fire of youth, had dimmed to the color of smoke and ash. He moved slower now. The cold settled into his bones each winter and stayed longer each spring. But the wolf inside him remained strong. Too strong. That was why he stayed in this broken place. That was why he could never leave. The first drops of rain struck the stone windowsill. Theron watched them fall, each one a small explosion against the ancient rock. Behind him, the great hall stretched empty and dark. Cobwebs hung from chandeliers that had once blazed with 100 candles. Tapestries rotted on the walls, their images of hunts and victories fading into gray obscurity. The long table where his father had hosted feasts now served as a bed for dust and silence. He had not lit a fire in 3 days. He had not eaten in 2. The hunger gnawed at him, but it was nothing compared to the other hunger, the one that lived in his blood, the one that howled for release every time the moon grew fat and silver in the sky. Tonight would be difficult. The storm would mask the moon, but he could feel its pull nonetheless. His skin itched. His teeth ached. The wolf paced behind his ribs like a prisoner testing the bars of his cage. Theron turned from the window and walked deeper into the keep. His footsteps echoed through empty corridors, past the armory where his father's sword still hung on the wall, past the library where books had turned to mold and dust, past the chamber where his father had claimed his mother died giving birth to Aldrich, his younger brother, the one whose blood still stained Theron's dreams. He had never questioned that story. His father had wept at the funeral, had built a tomb in her honor, had spoken her name with such grief that no son could doubt him. But Fenwick Ravencrest had been a man of many lies, and Theron had learned too late that grief could be performed as easily as love. He did not think about Aldrich. He did not allow himself to think about Aldrich. That way led to madness. That way led to the wolf breaking free. So he pushed the memories down, deep into the darkness where they belonged, and he kept walking. The cellar door groaned when he opened it. Stone steps descended into blackness. Theron did not need light. The wolf's eyes saw perfectly in the dark. He descended slowly, one hand trailing along the damp wall, until he reached the bottom. The chains hung from iron rings set into the bedrock. He had forged them himself in the first year of his exile, silver links alternating with steel, strong enough to hold him even when the beast took over, strong enough to keep him from killing anyone else. He stood in the darkness and listened to the storm rage above. This was his life now. This was all that remained of the great Ravencrest line. A broken man chaining himself in a cellar, a monster hiding from the moon, an alpha without a pack, without a purpose, without hope. The wolf stirred inside him. It sensed his weakness. It always sensed his weakness. Then another scent cut through the smell of rain and old stone. Blood, human blood, close, getting closer. Theron's head snapped up. His nostrils flared. The scent was fresh, maybe minutes old, carried on the wind that howled through the cracks in the keep's foundation. Someone was approaching Crimson Hollow. Someone wounded. Someone desperate. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time. The wolf surged forward, eager and hungry, but Theron held it back. He had not survived 10 years alone by giving in to every impulse. He had not kept himself from killing by abandoning his control. The great doors of his keep had been sealed for a decade. Theron had blocked them with fallen beams and debris to prevent anyone from entering, to prevent himself from leaving. But there was a smaller entrance through the kitchens, a servant's passage that opened onto the eastern courtyard. He moved through the darkness with the silence of a predator. The rain hammered against the roof. Thunder rolled across the valley like the drums of an approaching army, and beneath it all, that scent of blood grew stronger, sweeter, more desperate. The servants' passage was narrow and choked with debris. Theron squeezed through, his shoulders scraping against crumbling mortar, until he emerged into the courtyard. The rain struck him like a wall of ice. Within seconds, his clothes were soaked through, his hair plastered to his skull. He stood motionless, scanning the darkness, letting the wolf's senses paint a picture of what his eyes could not see. There, by the broken fountain, a small figure huddled against the stone basin. A child. No, not a child. A young man, barely past boyhood, his clothes torn and blood-stained, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Theron approached slowly. The wolf wanted to rush forward, to investigate, to establish dominance over this intruder in his territory. But Theron moved with deliberate calm. He had learned long ago that speed and violence solved fewer problems than they created. The boy looked up when Theron was 10 paces away. Even in the darkness, even through the rain, Theron could see the fear in those young eyes, the kind of fear that comes from being hunted, the kind of fear he knew all too well. The boy tried to stand, but his legs gave out beneath him. He collapsed against the fountain, clutching his side where blood seeped through his fingers. His lips moved, forming words that the storm swallowed before they could reach Theron's ears. Theron closed the distance between them. He crouched down, bringing himself to the boy's level. Up close, he could see more details. 16 years old, maybe 17. Thin, almost gaunt, with the look of someone who had not eaten regularly in a long time. Bruises covered his arms. Whip marks crossed his back, visible through the tears in his shirt. The boy's eyes widened when he saw Theron's face. Recognition flickered there, followed by something else, something that looked almost like hope. The boy spoke again. This time Theron heard the words. "Please, they said you were dead. They said the Alpha of Crimson Hollow was dead." Theron stared at the boy for a long moment. The rain ran down his face. The wolf growled inside him, suspicious of this stranger, this intruder, this disruption to the isolation he had cultivated for so long. "He is," Theron said finally. "You made a mistake coming here." He started to rise, to turn away, to return to his cellar and his chains and his endless waiting for the moon to pass. But the boy grabbed his wrist. The grip was weak, trembling, but it stopped Theron cold. "Please," the boy said again. "They are coming, the Thornwood pack. They will kill me if they find me. You are the only one they fear." Thornwood. The name sent a jolt through Theron's spine. He knew that name. He had heard whispers of it even in his isolation. Lord Malachar Thornwood. The wolf who had been expanding his territory for 20 years. The wolf who had absorbed or destroyed every pack in his path. The wolf who, according to the rumors, had somehow escaped the attention of the Lunar Covenant entirely. Theron looked down at the boy, at the blood, at the whip marks, at the terror in those young eyes. The wolf inside him went quiet. For the first time in years, the beast and the man agreed on something. "Can you walk?" The boy shook his head. His face had gone pale. He was losing too much blood. Theron sighed. He bent down and lifted the boy in his arms. The young man weighed almost nothing. How long had he been running? How long had he been starving? How long had he been prey? "Do not make me regret this," Theron said. He carried the boy inside. The great hall was dark and cold, but it was dry. Theron laid the boy on the floor near the empty hearth. For a moment he stood looking down at this stranger who had invaded his solitude. Then he went to gather wood from the scattered debris that littered the hall. He had not built a fire in years. The light would be visible from outside. It would announce his presence to anyone watching. But the boy was shivering, his lips turning blue, his blood forming a dark pool on the ancient stones. Without warmth, he would die before dawn. Theron built the fire. He struck flint to steel. He watched the sparks catch and grow. The flames cast dancing shadows across the walls, bringing a ghost of life to the dead hall. The wolf inside him shifted uneasily. Fire was dangerous. Fire was a beacon. Fire changed things. He went to the boy and examined the wound. A blade had caught him in the side, slicing through muscle but missing the vital organs. Lucky. Or perhaps not lucky at all. Perhaps whoever had wielded that blade had wanted the boy to live long enough to suffer. Theron cleaned the wound with water from the rain barrel outside. He tore strips from an old tapestry and bound the boy's side tight. The work was rough but effective. He had patched himself up enough times over the years to know what he was doing. The boy drifted in and out of consciousness. He muttered names Theron did not recognize. He cried out for someone called Mira. He begged unseen tormentors to stop, please stop, he would do anything they wanted. Theron sat by the fire and watched the boy struggle. He should have felt nothing. He had trained himself to feel nothing. But something stirred in his chest nonetheless. A memory of another young man, years ago. A memory of brown eyes filled with pain and fear and love. Aldrich, his brother, the one he had killed. Theron pushed the memory away. He fed the fire. He watched the storm rage outside. He waited. The boy woke near dawn. The storm had passed, leaving behind a gray sky and a world washed clean. The fire had burned down to embers. Theron sat in the same position he had occupied all night, his back against the wall, his eyes fixed on the flames. "You saved me." The boy's voice was hoarse but stronger than before. Theron turned to look at him. Color had returned to his cheeks. His eyes were clear. "Do not thank me yet. I have not decided what to do with you." The boy pushed himself up to a sitting position. He winced at the pain in his side but did not cry out. Theron noted this. The boy had been hurt enough to know how to bear pain in silence. "My name is Cormac. I was a slave of the Thornwood Pack. I escaped 3 days ago." "Thornwood does not keep slaves. Thornwood keeps whatever he wants. The Covenant looks the other way. Everyone looks the other way." Theron studied the boy. Cormac. The name meant nothing to him, but the hatred in those young eyes when he spoke of Thornwood, that meant something. "Why did you come here?" "Because I heard stories. About the Alpha who killed his own brother. About the beast who lives in the ruins of Crimson Hollow. They said you were mad. They said you were cursed. They said even Lord Malachar fears to enter your territory. They say many things. Are they true?" Theron was silent for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside, birds began to sing in the gray dawn. "Yes," he said finally, "they are true." Cormac nodded, as if this confirmed something he had already known. "Then let me stay. Train me. Make me strong enough to go back and free the others." "There are no others, not for you, not anymore. My sister is still there. Mira. She is only 14. Malachar keeps her as leverage, as insurance. If I go back without power, without allies, he will kill her just to punish me." "Sister." The word hit Theron harder than he expected. He thought of Aldrich again, of the brother he had failed, of the promise he had broken. "I cannot help you. Cannot or will not." Theron rose to his feet. He towered over the boy, his shadow falling across the makeshift bed like a shroud. "Both. Now rest. Regain your strength. When you can walk, you will leave." He turned and walked toward the door. Behind him, Cormac's voice rang out one last time. "You are afraid, not of Thornwood. You are afraid of yourself." Theron stopped. The wolf stirred inside him, bristling at the accusation. He did not turn around. "Smart boy. Remember that fear when you think of asking me again." He walked out into the gray morning and left Cormac alone with the dying fire. 3 days passed. Cormac healed faster than Theron expected. The young wolf's body knit itself back together with the resilience of youth. By the 2nd day, he was walking. By the 3rd, he was exploring the ruins of Crimson Hollow, poking through debris, examining the remnants of a life Theron had abandoned. Theron watched him but kept his distance. He told himself he was simply ensuring the boy did not disturb anything dangerous. He told himself he was waiting for Cormac to be strong enough to leave. He did not admit, even to himself, that having another living presence in the keep felt like water on parched earth. The full moon came and went. Theron chained himself in the cellar as always. The transformation took him, ripping through his body, turning man into beast. He howled and raged and threw himself against the chains until his wrists bled silver burns. But he held. He always held. When dawn came and the wolf receded, Theron climbed the stairs to find Cormac waiting at the top. The boy's face was pale. His hands trembled, but he did not run. "I heard you down there, all night. Then you know what I am." "I know what you become. I do not think they are the same thing." Theron pushed past him. His body ached. His wrists throbbed where the silver had burned. He needed water. He needed food. He needed to be alone. But Cormac followed him. The boy had found the well in the courtyard. He had drawn water. He had even found some dried meat in a cellar Theron had forgotten existed. He offered these things without words, simply placing them in Theron's path and stepping back. Theron ate and drank because his body demanded it. But when he was finished, he looked at the boy with new eyes. "Why are you still here?" "Because you have not made me leave. I told you to go." You told me to leave when I could walk. You did not say where I should go." The wolf stirred inside Theron. It was intrigued by this young creature who did not cower, who did not beg, who simply refused to be driven away. "Thornwood will come looking for you." "Perhaps. When he does, I will not protect you. I am not asking you to." Theron stared at the boy for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away. He did not tell Cormac to follow. He did not tell Cormac to stay. He simply accepted for the moment that he was no longer alone. She arrived on the 7th day. Theron sensed her before he saw her. A new scent on the wind. Female. Wolf. But not prey. No, this one was a predator. The scent carried undertones of blood and herbs and something else. Something ancient. Something dangerous. He found her at the main gate of the keep, examining the blocked entrance with calculating eyes. She was tall for a woman, nearly matching his own height. Her hair was dark red, the color of autumn leaves, pulled back from a face that bore the marks of hardship and survival. A scar ran from her left eyebrow to her jawline. Her hands were wrapped in leather straps stained with old blood. At her hip hung a curved blade. On her back, a pack stuffed with pouches and vials. She turned when she heard him approach. Her eyes met his without flinching. Green eyes, the green of deep forests, the green of poison and growth. Theron Ravencrest. Her voice was low and steady, not a question, a statement of fact. "Who asks? My name is Seraphina. I am a battle healer. I have come to kill the man who murdered my husband." The wolf surged inside Theron, hackles rising at the threat. But he held it back. He studied the woman before him, reading her stance, her breathing, her readiness. She was not afraid of him. She was not trying to intimidate him. She was simply stating her intention, the way a hunter might announce the beginning of a chase. "Many men have died by many hands. What makes you think I killed yours?" "Because his trail led here. Because he was investigating the Ravencrest curse when he disappeared. Because you are the only thing in these ruins still breathing." Theron considered this. The woman's logic was sound. If her husband had been poking into the affairs of Crimson Hollow, Theron was the obvious suspect, except for one problem. "I have not left these grounds in 10 years. I have not seen another soul until a week ago when a boy stumbled through my gate. If your husband came here, I never saw him." Seraphina's eyes narrowed. She did not believe him. He could see it in the set of her jaw, the tension in her shoulders. She had come here expecting a monster. She had come here ready to fight. "Prove it." "I have nothing to prove to you." "Then I will find the truth myself." She reached out toward him. Her fingers glowed faintly with a pale blue light. Theron recognized the sign of a battle healer's gift, the power to mend flesh or destroy it, the power to read pain and memory in the blood of others. The wolf snarled inside him. No one had touched him in 10 years. No one had been allowed close enough to try. But something in the woman's eyes stopped him from pulling away. Something that looked like grief. Something that looked like desperation. Her fingers touched his temple. The world dissolved. Theron found himself standing in a void of white and gray. Memories swirled around him like leaves in a hurricane. His memories, his life, every moment he had tried to bury rising to the surface. Seraphina walked beside him, her form translucent but present. She moved through his memories like a scholar examining a book, pausing here and there, absorbing what she found. She saw his childhood, the golden years before the curse took hold. She saw his father, proud and strong, teaching him to hunt and fight. She saw his mother, gentle and wise, telling him stories of the Lunar Covenant and the old ways. She saw Aldrich, young Aldrich with his quick smile and bright eyes. Aldrich who followed Theron everywhere. Aldrich who wanted nothing more than to be like his older brother. She saw the curse descend, the madness that crept into their father's eyes, the transformation that began to twist the pack, making them cruel, making them hungry for power and blood. She saw Aldrich discover the truth. Saw him dig through old records and forbidden texts, saw him realize that the curse was not natural, that someone had planted it in their bloodline like a seed of destruction. And then she saw the night. The harvest moon hung fat and silver in the sky. Aldrich stood in the courtyard of Crimson Hollow, his eyes wild, his body already beginning to shift. But this was not the normal transformation. This was something else, something forced, something triggered. Aldrich turned to Theron with tears streaming down his face. "Brother, he has done something to me. Father, He made a bargain with something dark, and now it lives in our blood. I can feel it taking over. I cannot stop it." Young Theron grabbed his brother's shoulders. "Fight it! We will find a way." "There is no way. It is already inside me. Soon it will make me kill. Everyone. You, the whole pack. Please, brother. You are the only one strong enough. End it before I become what Father has become. End it while I am still me." Theron watched his younger self crumble, watched him take his brother in his arms, watched the silver blade slide between Aldrich's ribs, quick and clean, a mercy killing disguised as murder. And then he saw what he had never seen before, a figure in the shadows, watching, waiting, a figure who wore the crest of Thornwood on his cloak, a figure who smiled as Aldrich died and Theron screamed his grief to the uncaring moon. The memory shattered. Theron staggered backward, gasping. Seraphina stood before him, her hand still raised, her face pale with shock. "You did not kill him," she whispered. "Not the way I thought." Theron could not speak. The image of that figure in the shadows burned in his mind. For 10 years, he had believed he was alone that night. For 10 years, he had carried the guilt of his brother's death without knowing there was a witness, a manipulator, a puppeteer. "There was someone else," Seraphina said. "Someone who wanted your brother dead. Someone who used you as the weapon." "Thornwood." The name came out as a growl. The wolf surged forward, filling Theron with rage and hunger and the overwhelming need to tear something apart. Seraphina grabbed his arm. Her touch burned with healing light, pushing back the beast, forcing him to stay human. "My husband," she said. "He was investigating the same thing. He found evidence that Thornwood was using dark magic to destabilize the old bloodlines, to trigger curses that had been dormant for generations, to destroy packs from within. And when he got too close to the truth, he disappeared 3 years ago. The trail went cold at the borders of your territory." Theron forced himself to breathe, to think, to put the pieces together. "Your husband did not die here. I would have sensed it, would have smelled the blood." "Then where?" "Thornwood. It has to be. He must have intercepted your husband before he reached me, killed him, and made it look like I was responsible." Seraphina was silent. Her grip on his arm loosened, but did not release. In her eyes, Theron saw the war between hope and despair, the desperate need to believe that her husband's death had meaning, that his killer could still be found and destroyed. "Why?" she asked. "Why go to such lengths? Why frame you for a murder you did not commit?" Theron turned and looked at the ruins of Crimson Hollow, the broken walls, the crumbling towers, the seat of power that had once commanded respect and fear throughout the land. "Because of what this place guards." He walked toward the center of the courtyard. Seraphina followed. Cormac emerged from the shadows where he had been watching, his young face tense with confusion and curiosity. Theron stopped at the foundation stone of the keep, a massive slab of granite engraved with the symbol of the Ravencrest line, a crescent moon pierced by a claw. "My ancestors were guardians of the Lunar Covenant. They built this keep on a convergence of ancient power. The walls, the stones, the very earth beneath our feet is woven with protective magic, magic that can only be controlled by Ravencrest blood." He crouched and placed his palm against the stone. Faint light pulsed beneath his fingers, responding to his touch. "Crimson Hollow sits on the only passage through the mountains that leads to the heart of the Covenant's territory. Any army that wants to strike at the old bloodlines must pass through here, but the magic prevents anyone without Ravencrest blood from leading forces through these lands. So Thornwood cannot attack the Covenant as long as you hold this keep," Seraphina said. "Correct. He does not need to kill me. He needs me to open the gate, to invite his forces through willingly." "And if you refuse?" Theron straightened, his eyes met hers. "Then he finds another way, a way that does not require my cooperation." Cormac stepped forward. His face had gone pale. "My sister, Mira. Thornwood has her." Theron nodded slowly. "Insurance, leverage. Thornwood does not make moves without multiple contingencies. He has been planning this for 20 years. My brother's death, the curse, your husband's murder, the slaves he takes, all pieces on a board we can barely see." Seraphina's hand went to the blade at her hip. "Then we find a way to stop him." "There is no we. This is not your fight. My husband died because of this. That makes it my fight. And the boy? He cannot fight. He will only slow us down." Cormac's jaw tightened. "I know things. Thornwood's camps, his routes, his lieutenants. I did not spend 3 years as his slave without learning something." Theron looked at the two of them, a battle healer driven by vengeance, A boy driven by love for his sister. Neither of them had any reason to trust him. Neither of them had any reason to stay. But they were here. And for the first time in 10 years, Theron felt something besides the endless hunger of the wolf and the crushing weight of guilt. He felt purpose. "If we do this," he said slowly, "there is no going back. Thornwood will not rest until we are all dead. He has resources, allies, an army. We have nothing. We have—" Seraphina smiled. It was not a warm expression. It was the smile of someone who had already accepted the possibility of death and found it irrelevant. "Then we build something. We find others who have lost to Thornwood. We gather information. We wait for the right moment to strike." "And my sister?" Cormac asked. "We will get her back, but not through force. Not yet. We need to understand what we are facing before we can hope to defeat it." Theron looked at the sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of red and gold. Somewhere out there, Malachar Thornwood was moving his pieces, preparing his board, expecting Theron to remain broken and alone in his ruins. He was wrong. "Very well," Theron said. "We will fight, but on my terms, in my way. And if either of you betrays me or endangers what I protect, I will kill you myself without hesitation." Seraphina met his gaze. "Agreed." Cormac nodded. "Agreed." The wolf stirred inside Theron. But for once, it was not straining against its chains. For once, it was standing beside him, looking outward instead of inward, hungry for something besides destruction. They returned to the keep as darkness fell. Theron lit another fire in the great hall. Seraphina produced food from her pack, herbs and dried meat and bread she had brought for her journey. Cormac fetched water from the well. They ate in silence. 3 strangers bound by circumstance and common enemies. 3 wolves who had lost everything and had nothing left to lose. When the meal was finished, Seraphina spoke. "There is something else you should know. The power I used to read your memories. It showed me more than just your past." Theron looked up. "What do you mean?" "When I touched your mind, I felt the curse that lives in your blood, the same curse that destroyed your brother. It is not dormant, Theron. It is not controlled. It is being fed. Something or someone is actively keeping it alive, waiting for the right moment to trigger it." The words hit Theron like a blow to the chest. He had always assumed the curse was a remnant, a scar left by his father's corruption. He had never considered that it might still be active. "Thornwood," he said. "Most likely. If he cannot force you to open the gate, he can trigger the curse and make you destroy everything yourself, just like your brother." Theron felt the wolf stir inside him. The beast was afraid. For the first time in years, the wolf was afraid. "How long do I have?" "I do not know, but the corruption is spreading, slowly. Every full moon it grows a little stronger." Cormac's voice cut through the silence. "Then we need to move fast. Find a way to break the curse before Thornwood can use it." "There may be a way," Seraphina said. "The old records speak of a ritual, a binding that can sever the connection between cursed blood and its source. But it requires knowledge I do not have. Knowledge that may exist only in the archives of the Lunar Covenant." Theron stood. He walked to the window and stared out at the darkness. His hands trembled. His heart pounded against his ribs. The wolf howled inside him, torn between rage and despair. He had thought he had nothing left to lose. He had been wrong. "Then that is where we begin," he said. "We find the archives, we break the curse, and then we take the fight to Thornwood himself." Seraphina rose and stood beside him. Her presence was warm and solid, an anchor in the storm that threatened to consume him. "You are not alone anymore, Theron Ravencrest. Whatever comes, we face it together." He did not answer. He did not know how to answer. For 10 years he had been alone with his guilt and his wolf and his chains. For 10 years he had waited to die. Now he had a reason to live. Outside, the moon rose over Crimson Hollow. Silver light spilled through the broken windows, touching the 3 figures who stood in the great hall. A fallen alpha, a vengeful healer, a boy with nothing left but hope. The war was coming. They could all feel it in their bones. But for the first time in a very long time, Theron Ravencrest was ready to fight. The night deepened around them. Seraphina retreated to a corner of the great hall, sorting through her supplies. Cormac curled up near the fire, his young body surrendering to exhaustion. Theron did not sleep. He sat in the shadows, watching the fire die, feeling the wolf pace restlessly in the cage of his ribs. The curse. Seraphina's words echoed in his mind. Something or someone is actively keeping it alive. He had believed the curse was a wound that would heal if left alone. Now he understood the truth. Someone had been feeding it, nurturing it, waiting for the perfect moment to make it fatal. Thornwood. Everything led back to Thornwood. Dawn came slowly, gray light seeping through the broken windows like water through cracked stone. Serafina was already awake, heating water over the rekindled fire. The smell of herbs filled the air, something medicinal, something that cut through the dust and decay of the abandoned hall. She looked up when Theron approached. Her green eyes studied him with the analytical gaze of a healer assessing a patient. "You did not sleep." "I do not sleep much, not anymore." "The wolf?" "The wolf. The memories. The weight of everything I have done and failed to do." She handed him a cup of the herbal brew. He took it without complaint. The liquid was bitter but warming, spreading heat through his chest and loosening the tension in his shoulders. "Tell me about your husband," Theron said. Serafina was quiet for a moment, her hands wrapped around her own cup. Steam rose between them, curling in the cold morning air. "His name was Gareth. He was a scholar of the old bloodlines, spent his life researching the history of the great pacts, the rise and fall of the Lunar Covenant, the origins of the curses that plague our kind." "How did you meet?" "I was assigned to protect him during an expedition into the Northern Territories. He was studying the ruins of the Frost Fang Pack. I thought he was a fool, soft, more interested in dusty records than survival." A faint smile crossed her lips. "He proved me wrong. When we were ambushed by feral wolves, he did not hide behind me. He stood and fought badly, with more courage than skill, but he stood. You loved him. I loved him. We had 7 years together before Thornwood took him from me." The fire crackled. Cormac stirred in his sleep but did not wake. Outside, birds began their morning chorus, oblivious to the weight of grief and vengeance that filled the great hall. "I know what it is to lose someone," Theron said quietly, "to carry that loss like a stone in your chest, to feel it with every breath." Serafina met his eyes. Something passed between them, not attraction, not trust, something deeper, recognition. They had both been broken by loss. They both knew what it meant to survive when others did not. Gareth's last letter mentioned that he had found something, a connection between Thornwood and an ancient power, something older than the Covenant itself. What kind of power? He did not say. The letter was unfinished. He must have been interrupted before he could complete it. Theron considered this. An ancient power, a connection to the curses. If Gareth had been right, then Thornwood was not simply using dark magic. He was tapping into something fundamental, something that predated the very civilization they belonged to. "We need those archives," Theron said. "We need to understand what we are truly fighting. The Lunar Covenant will not welcome you. You are a fallen alpha, a kinslayer. They have every reason to refuse you entry." "Then we find another way in." Serafina smiled, that cold, calculating smile that Theron was beginning to recognize. "I may know someone, an old contact from my days as a guardian. She works in the outer archives. She owes me a debt." "Can she be trusted?" "She can be bought. In our world, that is often more reliable than trust." Cormac woke as the sun climbed higher. He stretched carefully, testing his wounded side, and grimaced at the lingering pain. But he was stronger than he had been. Young wolves healed fast. "What is the plan?" he asked, joining them by the fire. "We need information," Theron said, "about Thornwood's plans, about the curse, about whatever ancient power he is using." "The archives of the Lunar Covenant may have answers," Serafina added. "I have a contact who can get us access." "What do you need me to do?" Theron studied the boy, the eagerness in his eyes, the desperation to be useful. He remembered that feeling from his own youth, the burning need to prove himself, to matter. "Tell me everything you know about Thornwood's operations, his camps, his routes, his lieutenants, every detail, no matter how small." Cormac nodded. For the next hour he spoke. The words poured out of him like water from a burst dam. He described the layout of Thornwood's main camp, the patrol schedules, the hierarchy of command. He named the wolves who held power and those who resented it. He explained how slaves were kept, where they worked, what they were forced to do. And he spoke of his sister, Mira, 14 years old, dark hair like her brother, eyes that had once been bright with mischief and wonder, now dimmed by 3 years of captivity. She was kept in the main household as a servant to Thornwood's mate, a position that afforded her some protection, but also placed her in constant danger. "Thornwood uses her to control me," Cormac said, his voice cracked. Every time I tried to fight back, every time I refused an order, they would hurt her, make sure I could hear her screams. Theron felt the wolf stir inside him. Anger. Hot and bright and dangerous. He forced it down, focusing on the details, on the tactical value of what Cormac was sharing. When we move against Thornwood, your sister will be our priority. We will not let her be used as leverage again. Cormac looked at him. For a moment, the hardness faded from his young face. You mean that? I do not make promises I cannot keep, but this one I will keep or die trying. The boy's eyes glistened. He turned away quickly, hiding the emotion. But Theron had seen it. The hope. The desperate, fragile hope that someone might actually help. It was the same hope Theron had seen in Aldrich's eyes, moments before the end. The day passed in preparation. Seraphina inventoried her supplies. Theron walked the perimeter of Crimson Hollow, checking the old wards and defenses. The keep was more damaged than he had realized. Walls had crumbled, roofs had collapsed, but the foundation remained strong. The protective magic still pulsed beneath the earth, responding to his blood and will. As long as a Ravencrest lived, Crimson Hollow would stand. Theron paused at the highest point of the ruined walls, looking out over the valley. Somewhere beyond the mountains lay the heart of the Lunar Covenant. And somewhere in the shadow of those peaks, Malachar Thornwood was gathering his strength. Theron returned to the great hall as evening fell. Seraphina had prepared another meal. Cormac had found candles in a storage room and lit them, driving back the darkness. The flickering light made the ruined hall feel almost alive again, almost like a home. They ate together in silence. 3 wolves who had found each other in the wreckage of their lives. 3 strangers who were becoming something more. When the meal was finished, Seraphina spoke. We should leave at dawn. The journey to my contact will take 3 days if we travel fast, longer if we encounter patrols. Thornwood's reach extends this far? His scouts have been seen in the borderlands, not within your territory, not yet, but close. Theron nodded. Then we move carefully. No unnecessary risks, no heroics. And if we are discovered? The wolf stirred inside him. For a moment, its hunger was his hunger. Its rage was his rage. Then we do what wolves do, Theron said quietly. We fight, we survive, and we remember what we are fighting for. Seraphina met his eyes. Cormac straightened in his seat. The candlelight flickered around them, casting their shadows long across the ancient stone walls. Tomorrow they would begin their journey. Tomorrow they would take the first step toward war. But tonight they would rest. They would gather their strength. They would allow themselves one last moment of peace before the storm. Theron looked at the 2 people who had entered his life and changed everything. A healer seeking vengeance. A boy seeking to save his sister. Neither of them had asked to be part of his story. Neither of them had any obligation to stand beside him. But they were here, and that meant something. For 10 years, Theron had believed he deserved nothing but isolation and pain. Now he understood the truth. The curse was not his punishment. It was his prison. Built by wolves who knew that Theron Ravencrest, broken as he was, still had the power to change everything. They had tried to destroy him. They had failed. Now it was his turn. The moon rose over Crimson Hollow, full and bright and merciless. Theron felt its pull in his blood. The wolf stirred. The curse whispered promises of power and release. But tonight, he did not go to the cellar. Tonight, he did not chain himself in the darkness. Instead, he stood at the window of the great hall and watched the moon climb into the sky. He felt the beast surge against his control. He felt the madness scratching at the edges of his mind. And he held. Not because he had to. Not because he feared what would happen if he let go. But because he had something to fight for now. Someone to protect. A purpose beyond survival. The wolf howled inside him, but it was not a howl of rage or hunger. It was a howl of recognition, of acceptance, of partnership. For the first time in 10 years, man and beast stood together instead of against each other. For the first time in 10 years, Theron Ravencrest felt whole. The night deepened. The moon continued its eternal journey across the sky, and in the ruins of Crimson Hollow, a fallen alpha began to rise. They traveled for 3 days through the borderlands. The forest closed around them like a fist. Ancient trees blocked the sun, their branches intertwined overhead in a canopy so thick that noon looked like dusk. The air smelled of pine and decay, of things that grew in darkness and things that died there. Theron led the way. His senses stretched outward, probing the shadows, searching for threats. The wolf inside him remained alert but calm. It had accepted this journey. It had accepted these companions, for now. Serafina walked beside him, her steps silent on the carpet of fallen needles. She carried her pack of healing supplies and her curved blade, ready for either mercy or violence. Her green eyes never stopped moving, cataloging every sound, every shift in the undergrowth. Cormac brought up the rear. The boy had healed well. His wound had closed to a thin pink line, and his strength had returned with the resilience of youth. But his eyes held shadows that no amount of rest could erase. He was thinking of his sister. He was always thinking of his sister. On the second night, they made camp in a hollow between two fallen oaks. No fire. The smoke would be visible for miles in this still air. They ate cold rations and spoke in whispers. "We are being watched," Serafina said quietly. Theron nodded. He had sensed them since midday. 2 scouts, maybe 3, keeping their distance but tracking their progress. Thornwood's eyes in the forest, as in... "They will not attack," he said. "Not yet. They are reporting our movements." "To whom?" "To whoever commands them. Malachar likes to know where his pieces are on the board." Cormac shifted uneasily. "Should we try to lose them?" "No. Let them watch. Let them report. The more Thornwood focuses on us, the less attention he pays to other threats." Serafina's eyes met his in the darkness. She understood. They were bait as much as hunters, drawing the enemy's gaze while they gathered information and allies. On the third day, they reached the meeting point. A ruined shrine at the foot of the mountains, half swallowed by ivy and time. The stones still bore traces of the old symbols, the prayers of a people long forgotten. Serafina's contact was waiting. She was old, older than anyone Theron had seen in years. Her hair was white as snow, her face a map of wrinkles and weathered skin, but her eyes were sharp and clear, the eyes of someone who had survived by seeing what others missed. "Marin," Serafina said. "Sarah!" The old woman's voice crackled like dry leaves. "You look terrible. 3 years of hunting will do that. Did you find him, the one who killed your man?" "I found something better. I found the truth." Marin's eyes shifted to Theron. She studied him the way a butcher studies a carcass, assessing value and threat in equal measure. "Theron Ravencrest, the fallen alpha, the kinslayer." She smiled, revealing teeth yellowed by age. "You are either very brave or very stupid to show your face near Covenant territory." "I have been called both." "And which is it? Does it matter?" Marin laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "I like him, Sarah. He has the look of a man who has stopped caring whether he lives or dies. Those are the most dangerous kind." She led them into the shrine, through a hidden passage that descended into the earth. The tunnel was old, carved by hands that had turned to dust centuries ago. Torches flickered in brackets on the walls, casting dancing shadows. "The archives you seek are not easy to access," Marin said as they walked. "The Covenant guards its secrets jealously, but there are always ways for those willing to pay the price." "What price?" Theron asked. "That depends on what you are looking for. Information about the Ravencrest curse, its origins, how it was created, and how it can be broken." Marin stopped walking. She turned to face him, her sharp eyes narrowing. "The Ravencrest curse is not a simple thing. It was woven from blood and betrayal, from promises made to powers older than the Covenant itself. Breaking it would require knowledge that has been forbidden for generations." "Then find me that knowledge." "And if the price is too high?" Theron met her gaze without flinching. "There is no price too high. Not anymore." Marin studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Wait here. I will see what can be found." She disappeared into the shadows. The 3 of them stood in the torchlight, surrounded by stone and silence. "Can she be trusted?" Cormac whispered. "No," Serafina said, "but she can be relied upon to serve her own interests. Right now, those interests align with ours. And when they do not? Then we will deal with that when it comes." They waited. Minutes stretched into hours. The torches burned low and were replaced by others. The air grew thick and stale. Finally, Marin returned. She carried a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, and her face was troubled. "I found what you seek," she said. "But I also found something else, something you need to see before you proceed." She unwrapped the bundle. Inside were scrolls and bound manuscripts, their pages yellow with age, and beneath them a letter sealed with black wax. "This arrived at the Covenant 3 days ago," Marin said. "It bears the seal of Lord Malachar Thornwood." Theron took the letter. The wax cracked beneath his fingers. He unfolded the parchment and read. The words hit him like a physical blow. To the Lords of the Lunar Covenant, the letter began. I write to inform you of a matter of great importance. The fallen Alpha of Crimson Hollow has emerged from his exile. He gathers allies and plots against the peace of our territories. I have attempted to reason with him, but he remains consumed by madness and vengeance. I therefore request the Covenant's permission to deal with this threat by whatever means necessary. As a gesture of good faith, I offer proof of my commitment to peace. I hold in my custody the Lady Elena Ravencrest, mother of the fallen Alpha, who has been under my protection these past 20 years since her supposed death. I will deliver her to the Covenant as a hostage against her son's good behavior, or I will execute her as a traitor to wolfkind. The choice is yours. Theron's hands trembled. The paper crinkled in his grip. My mother, he breathed. She is alive. Seraphina moved to his side. She read the letter over his shoulder, her face going pale. 20 years. Thornwood has held her for 20 years. No. Theron's voice was hollow. My father held her. Fenwick. He told us she died in childbirth when Aldrich was born. He told us she was gone. The memories crashed over him like a wave. His mother's face, gentle and kind. The stories she had told him as a child. The way she had looked at him with such love, such hope. And then the day his father had gathered them in the great hall and told them she was dead. The funeral, the empty grave, the years of grief. All of it a lie. Thornwood took her when your father died, Merrin said quietly. She has been a prisoner ever since, a piece on the board held in reserve for the right moment. And now he plays her, Seraphina said, to force your hand, to make you desperate. Theron lowered the letter. His eyes had changed. The gold of the wolf blazed behind them, barely contained. Where is she? Thornwood's main camp, the same place they keep Cormac's sister. Merrin paused. He is gathering his forces there, preparing for something big. Whatever you plan to do, you must do it soon. Theron turned to face the others. His face was stone, but beneath it, a fire burned that threatened to consume everything. We go to Thornwood's camp. That is exactly what he wants, Seraphina said. He is baiting you, drawing you into a trap. I know. And you will go anyway. My mother has been a prisoner for 20 years because of my family's failures. Cormac's sister has suffered for 3 years because no one was strong enough to challenge Thornwood. I will not let them suffer one more day while I hide in ruins and gather information. Cormac stepped forward. His young face was set with determination. I am with you, whatever it takes. Seraphina was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. This is foolish. This is reckless. This is exactly the kind of thing that gets people killed. Yes. And you are going to do it regardless of what I say. Yes. She shook her head. But when she looked at him, there was something in her eyes that had not been there before. Something that looked almost like respect. Then we do it smart, we do it careful, and we do not die for nothing. They left the shrine before dawn. Merrin provided what help she could. Maps of Thornwood's territory, information about patrol routes and guard schedules, the locations of the prisoners. In exchange, Theron promised her access to the Ravencrest archives if they survived. A fair bargain, the old woman said, though I suspect I will never collect. Perhaps not, but the offer stands. Merrin watched them go. At the edge of the tree line, Theron paused and looked back. The old woman raised one gnarled hand in farewell, or perhaps in warning, he could not tell which. They traveled fast, pushing through the forest at a pace that would have exhausted normal men. But they were not normal men. They were wolves, driven by purpose and rage and the desperate hope that they were not already too late. On the second night, as they rested in a cave high on a mountain ridge, the ghost came. Theron felt it before he saw it. A cold presence, a weight in the air, a pressure against his mind. He rose from his makeshift bed and walked to the mouth of the cave, where moonlight pooled like silver water. His father stood there. Fenwick Ravencrest looked exactly as Theron remembered him from childhood, tall and proud, with the bearing of a man born to command. But his edges were blurred, his form translucent, and his eyes held a sorrow that no living man could bear. Son. The word echoed strangely, as if it came from a great distance. You are dead, Theron said. Yes, but death is not the end, not for those bound by blood curses and broken oaths. What do you want? Fenwick's ghost drifted closer. The cold deepened around him, frost forming on the rocks. To warn you, to tell you what I should have told you years ago, before the madness took me, before I became the monster you remember. I do not want your warnings. I do not want your excuses. Then listen for your mother's sake, for Aldrich's, for the sake of everything our family once stood for." Theron's jaw tightened, but he did not turn away. "Speak then. Tell me what lies you have prepared." Fenwick's ghost seemed to sag, as if the weight of centuries pressed down upon his insubstantial shoulders. "The curse was not my creation. I was tricked into it, manipulated by one I thought was a friend, a prophet, a guide to greater power. He came to me when I was young and ambitious, when I believed that strength was the answer to every question." Malachar Thornwood. Yes, though he did not use that name then. He called himself a servant of the old ways, a keeper of forbidden knowledge. He promised me that the Ravencrest line could become the greatest of all the wolf clans, that we could rule not just Crimson Hollow, but the entire territory. And you believed him. I was a fool. I see that now. But by the time I understood what he truly was, it was too late. The curse had taken root in our blood. It twisted me, turned me against everyone I loved. Your mother tried to stop me. She discovered what I had done and threatened to expose the truth to the Covenant. Theron felt the wolf stir inside him. Anger and grief tangled together, threatening to tear him apart. "So you imprisoned her, told us she was dead." I told myself I was protecting her, protecting you, but I know now that I was only protecting my own shame. Fenwick's ghost looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold all the sorrow of the ages. "I failed you, Theron. I failed all of you. The curse consumed me, and in my madness, I passed that consumption to Aldrich, and I killed him for it. You freed him. That is what he asked you to do. That is what I should have asked, before I was too far gone to ask for anything." The ghost flickered, its form beginning to fade. "There is a way to break the curse. The scrolls you carry contain the ritual, but it requires a sacrifice, blood for blood, power for power. You must give up the wolf inside you to sever the connection to the darkness. Become human. Yes, no longer alpha, no longer wolf, just a man." Theron stared at his father's fading form. The weight of the choice pressed down on him like a mountain. "And if I refuse, if I keep the wolf and fight Thornwood as I am, then you will fall. The curse will consume you, just as it consumed me and Aldrich, and Thornwood will use your madness to destroy everything you seek to protect." The ghost was almost gone now, barely a shimmer in the moonlight. "One more thing, son. The boy who travels with you, Cormac, he carries Ravencrest blood, Aldrich's blood. He is your brother's son, hidden away to protect him from the curse." The word struck Theron like a thunderbolt. Cormac, his nephew, his blood. Aldrich had a child? A secret he kept from everyone, even me. The boy's mother was a servant girl who died giving birth. Aldrich placed the infant with a family in the outer territories, hoping to spare him from our cursed legacy. But fate has brought him back to you. The ghost flickered one last time. "Protect him, Theron. He is the future of our line, the only future that matters now." And then Fenwick Ravencrest was gone, leaving only cold air and silence behind. Theron stood in the moonlight for a long time. His mind raced through everything he had heard. Cormac was Aldrich's son, his nephew, the heir to Crimson Hollow, a boy he had sworn to protect without knowing the truth of their connection. The wolf inside him howled, not with rage this time, but with something else. Recognition, pack instinct, the primal drive to protect one's blood at any cost. He returned to the cave and found Seraphina awake, her green eyes watching him in the darkness. "You spoke with someone." "My father's ghost." She did not seem surprised. Battle healers dealt with the dead as often as the living. "What did he tell you?" Theron sat down heavily. He felt older than his 45 years. He felt ancient, worn down by the weight of secrets and sorrows. "The curse can be broken, but I must give up the wolf to do it, become fully human." Seraphina was quiet for a moment. "And the alternative?" "The curse consumes me. I become like my father. Malachar wins. That is not much of a choice." "No, it is not." She moved closer to him. In the darkness, her hand found his. The touch was warm and solid, an anchor in the storm. "There is something else," Theron said. "Cormac, he is my nephew, Aldrich's son." The silence stretched between them. Outside, the wind whispered through the mountain passes. "Does he know?" "I do not think so. Aldrich hid him to protect him from the curse, but if Thornwood discovers the truth, he becomes an even more valuable hostage. Another Ravencrest to control the protective magic of Crimson Hollow." Theron nodded grimly. "We cannot let that happen." "Then we do not let it happen." Seraphina's grip tightened on his hand. "We get your mother and Cormac's sister out of Thornwood's camp. We break the curse, and we end Malachar once and for all." It is not that simple. Nothing ever is, but we do it anyway. He looked at her in the darkness. This woman who had come to kill him and stayed to fight beside him. This healer who carried death in one hand and life in the other. Why? He asked. Why do you stay? You could walk away, find safer paths, live longer. Serafina smiled faintly. I could, but I spent 3 years hunting a ghost, chasing vengeance across half the territories, letting hatred consume everything else. And then I met you. A broken alpha hiding in ruins. A man who refused to let his darkness destroy others. A man who chained himself in a cellar every full moon rather than risk hurting anyone. That takes more strength than any battle I have ever seen. She released his hand and stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow we plan our assault on Thornwood's camp, and I prefer my allies conscious for the dangerous parts. She walked back to her bedroll and lay down with her back to him. Within minutes, her breathing had slowed to the rhythm of sleep. Theron sat alone in the darkness, thinking about everything that had been said. The curse, the sacrifice, Cormac's true identity, his mother, alive after 20 years of imprisonment. The wolf stirred inside him. It knew what was coming. It knew that its days might be numbered. But for the first time, there was no struggle between man and beast, only acceptance, only readiness. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And when the time came to choose, Theron would make the only choice he could. He would protect his pack, whatever the cost. Dawn came gray and cold. They broke camp in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Cormac moved with the restless energy of youth, his body ready for action, even as his mind wrestled with fears he could not name. He did not know the truth yet. Theron had decided to wait. The boy had enough weight on his shoulders without adding the burden of legacy. They descended from the mountains into the lowlands where Thornwood's territory began. The forest changed here. The trees were darker, their trunks twisted into unnatural shapes. The air smelled of smoke and blood, faint but unmistakable. This was land that had known war, land that had been conquered and broken. We are close, Serafina murmured. I can feel it. His main camp is beyond that ridge, Cormac said, pointing to a line of hills in the distance. 3,000 wolves, maybe more. Soldiers, slaves, families. It is more a city than a camp. How do we get in without being seen? There are tunnels. The slaves use them to move supplies. I know a few that are not heavily guarded. Theron studied the terrain with a tactician's eye. The ridge offered good cover for approach. The forest would mask their scent if they moved carefully. But 3,000 wolves meant 3,000 pairs of ears, 3,000 noses, 3,000 chances to be discovered. We cannot fight our way through, he said. We need another approach. Serafina pulled out the maps Marin had provided. She spread them on a flat rock, tracing routes with her finger. The prisoners are kept here, in the eastern quarter, a fortified building near Thornwood's personal quarters, separate from the general population. Guards? A dozen at least, more during shift changes. And Thornwood himself? Unpredictable. He moves constantly, never sleeps in the same place twice. Cormac leaned over this map. There is something else. Thornwood is planning something. I heard rumors before I escaped. A gathering of alphas, some kind of alliance or conquest. The timing coincides with the new moon, 3 days from now. Theron considered this. A gathering of alphas meant that attention would be focused inward, on politics and power plays. It also meant that security would be tightened, with so many important wolves in one place. We strike during this gathering, he decided. Maximum distraction, minimum attention on the prisoners. That is 3 days away, Serafina said. Can we stay hidden that long? We will have to. They made camp in a ravine carved by an ancient river, now dry and overgrown. The walls provided cover from aerial observation, and the dense brush at either end created natural barriers. It was not comfortable, but it was secure. For 3 days, they waited. They watched the patrols from hidden vantages. They memorized the guard rotations. They studied the layout of the camp until they could navigate it blindfolded. And they talked. On the first night, Serafina told them about her life before Gareth. She had been a guardian for the Lunar Covenant, assigned to protect diplomats and scholars as they traveled through dangerous territories. She had killed her first enemy at 17. By 25, she had lost count. I thought I was doing good, she said, staring into the darkness. Protecting the innocent, serving the cause. But the Covenant is not what it pretends to be. The lords who rule it are more interested in preserving their power than protecting their people. That is the way of all lords, Theron said. Perhaps, but Gareth made me believe it could be different. He believed in knowledge, in truth, in using what we know to build something better, and Thornwood killed him for it. On the second night, Cormac spoke of his sister. Mira was 11 when they took us. Our parents had died in a fever the winter before, and we were living with relatives who could barely feed themselves. When Thornwood's recruiters came, they promised food and shelter in exchange for service. We did not understand what service meant. His voice cracked, but he pushed on. She protected me at first. She was older, stronger. She took punishments that should have been mine. And then Thornwood noticed her, saw something in her that he wanted to control. He moved her to the main household, away from me, and used her as leverage to keep me obedient. "You escaped to save her," Theron said. "I escaped because I could not save her from inside. I needed help. I needed someone strong enough to challenge Thornwood directly." Cormac looked at him. "I found you." On the third night, they finalized their plan. Cormac would lead them through the tunnels to the eastern quarter. Seraphina would neutralize the guards silently, using her knowledge of pressure points and nerve clusters to incapacitate without killing. Theron would find the prisoners and extract them while the gathering distracted the camp's leadership. If everything went perfectly, they would be gone before anyone noticed. Nothing ever went perfectly. The night of the gathering arrived. The camp blazed with torchlight. Music and shouting echoed across the valley as hundreds of wolves celebrated their lord's power. Theron watched from the ridge, his sharp eyes picking out details in the chaos below. Thornwood stood on a raised platform in the center of the camp. He was tall and lean, with silver hair that gleamed in the firelight. His face was handsome in a cold, calculating way, the face of a man who smiled easily and meant none of it. Around him stood a circle of alphas from a dozen different packs, their postures tense with rivalry and ambition. "He is making his pitch," Seraphina murmured, offering them a share of whatever he is planning in exchange for their loyalty. "Will they accept?" "Some will. The greedy ones, the desperate ones. Thornwood knows how to find weakness and exploit it." They descended through the darkness, moving like shadows between the trees. Cormac led them to a concealed entrance behind a storage building, a wooden hatch covered in dirt and leaves. The tunnel below was narrow and foul-smelling, but it was empty. They moved in single file, Cormac first, then Seraphina, then Theron. The tunnel twisted and branched, but the boy navigated it without hesitation. He had crawled through these passages 100 times as a slave. They were written into his memory. After what felt like hours, they emerged in a cellar beneath a stone building. The air was cleaner here, tinged with herbs and medicine. A healer's quarters. "The prisoner building is connected to this one," Cormac whispered, "through that door." They crept forward. The door opened onto a narrow corridor lit by a single torch. At the far end, 2 guards stood before a heavy iron gate. Seraphina moved. Her footsteps made no sound. Her hands found their targets with the precision of a surgeon. One guard crumpled, then the other. Neither made a sound. Theron caught the keys from the first guard's belt. He unlocked the gate and stepped into the darkness beyond. The cells were small and cold. The smell of suffering hung in the air like a physical weight. Theron moved past empty chambers until he found the ones that were occupied. Cormac's sister was in the first. Mira, 14 years old, dark hair like her brother, tangled and dirty, eyes that widened with disbelief when she saw Cormac's face. "Brother? Quiet, we are getting you out." Theron unlocked the cell and moved to the next one. And there, sitting on a stone bench with her back straight and her head high, was a woman he had not seen in 20 years. Elena Ravencrest looked at her son with eyes that held no surprise, only a fierce, burning love that time and imprisonment had not dimmed. "I knew you would come," she said softly. "I always knew." Theron could not speak. The wolf inside him keened with a grief and joy so tangled that he could not separate them. He opened the cell and helped her to her feet. She was thin and fragile, but her grip on his arm was strong. "We have to move," Seraphina said from the doorway. "The gathering is ending. Guards will be returning to their posts." They moved back through the corridor, back through the healer's quarters, back into the tunnel. Cormac supported his sister. Theron kept his mother close. Seraphina brought up the rear, her blade drawn, her senses alert. They were halfway through the tunnel when the shouting started. "They know!" Cormac hissed. "Someone found the guards." "Keep moving, faster." They ran through the darkness, stumbling over roots and debris. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Boots on stone, Angry voices, the howling of wolves who had caught a scent. They burst from the tunnel into the open air. The forest stretched before them, dark and welcoming. Freedom was so close. And then Malachar Thornwood stepped out of the shadows. He was not alone. A dozen warriors flanked him, their eyes gleaming with predatory hunger. But it was Thornwood himself who commanded attention. His presence filled the clearing like a physical force, ancient and terrible. "Theron Ravencrest," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I have been waiting for this moment for a very long time." Theron pushed his mother behind him. The wolf surged inside him, straining against his control. "Let them go. This is between you and me." Thornwood smiled. It was the smile of a man who held all the cards and knew it. "But that is where you are wrong. This has never been just about you. This is about legacy, about power, about the future of our kind." His eyes shifted to Cormac, and about bloodlines that should have ended long ago, but refused to die. He knows, Theron realized. He knows about Cormac. The boy is not part of this. The boy is everything. Aldrich's son, the last true heir of Ravencrest. Did you think I would not discover the truth? I have been watching your bloodline for 40 years, waiting for the right moment to claim what was always meant to be mine. Thornwood raised his hand, his warriors tensed, ready to strike. "Surrender now, and I will make their deaths quick. Fight, and I will make them suffer in ways you cannot imagine." Theron felt the curse stir inside him. The darkness that had consumed his father and brother reached for him with eager hands. It would be so easy to let go, to let the wolf take over, to tear through these enemies in a fury of fang and claw. But that was exactly what Thornwood wanted. The curse fed on rage, on violence, on the surrender of control. If Theron gave in now, he would become exactly what his enemies needed him to be. Instead, he drew a deep breath. He looked at Seraphina, at Cormac, at his mother, who had survived 20 years of imprisonment without breaking, and he made his choice. "Seraphina, take them and run. I will hold them here." "Theron, no. This is not a debate. Go, now." He stepped forward, placing himself between Thornwood and the people he had sworn to protect. The wolf rose inside him, but he held it back. Not yet. Not until they were safe. "How noble," Thornwood said. "How utterly predictable. The sacrificial alpha, throwing his life away for people who will die anyway." "Perhaps, but not today," Theron charged. The battle was chaos and blood. Theron fought like a man possessed, his fists and claws finding their targets with deadly precision. Warriors fell around him, but more took their place. He was outnumbered, outmatched, and he did not care. Behind him he heard Seraphina shouting orders, heard the crash of bodies through underbrush, heard, finally, the fading sounds of escape. They were getting away. That was all that mattered. A blade caught him across the ribs. Another opened his shoulder. He staggered but did not fall. The wolf howled inside him, demanding release. The curse whispered promises of power. And then Thornwood was there, his hand closing around Theron's throat. "Enough." The word carried power, ancient power, the same darkness that had corrupted Fenwick and destroyed Aldrich. Theron felt it wash over him, trying to drown him, trying to pull him under. The wolf thrashed and screamed. But deep inside, in the place where his humanity still lived, Theron held on. "You cannot break me," he gasped. "I am not my father." Thornwood's eyes narrowed. "No, you are something worse. You are a man who still believes in hope." He tightened his grip. Darkness closed in around the edges of Theron's vision. "Sleep now, fallen alpha. When you wake, we will see how long that hope survives." The last thing Theron saw before unconsciousness claimed him was Thornwood's smile, cold and patient and utterly without mercy. When consciousness returned, it came slowly, like climbing out of a deep well, hand over hand, fighting for every inch. Theron opened his eyes to darkness. Not the darkness of night, but the darkness of stone walls and iron bars. A cell. He was in a cell, his wrists bound in silver chains that burned against his skin. He tested the restraints. They held firm. The silver sapped his strength, keeping the wolf dormant, keeping him weak. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. A torch flickered to life, casting dancing shadows through the bars. Thornwood appeared, still wearing that patient smile. "You are awake. Good. I was beginning to worry." "Where are they?" Theron's voice came out as a rasp. "My mother, the others." "Gone. Your healer friend proved resourceful. She got them to the forest before my wolves could catch them." Thornwood's smile widened. "But do not worry. They will not get far. I have trackers on their trail. By dawn, they will be back in my hands." "If you harm them..." "You will what?" Glare at me from behind those bars? Rattle your chains in fury?" Thornwood laughed softly. "You are in no position to threaten anyone, Fallen Alpha. You lost. Accept it." He moved closer to the bars, studying Theron with clinical interest. "I have waited 40 years for this moment. 40 years of planning, manipulating, positioning pieces on the board. Your father was my first great success. Such a proud man, so hungry for power. It took almost nothing to convince him that the curse was a blessing in disguise. You destroyed my family. I elevated your family. The Ravencrest name would have faded into obscurity without my intervention. Instead, it became legend. The cursed bloodline, the fallen alpha, stories that will be told for generations." Theron strained against his chains. The silver burned deeper, sending waves of pain through his arms. "And now," Thornwood continued, "we come to the final act. You will open the gate of Crimson Hollow for my armies. You will renounce your claim to the territory. And in exchange, I will allow your mother and the others to live out their days in comfortable captivity." "No." "No?" Thornwood's eyebrows rose. "You would condemn them to death for the sake of pride?" "I would condemn myself to death before I let you destroy everything my ancestors built. The protective magic of Crimson Hollow exists for a reason. It guards the passage to the heart of the Covenant. If you breach it, thousands will die. Thousands who oppose my vision for our kind. Thousands who cling to outdated traditions and foolish notions of honor. The world is changing, Ravencrest. The old ways are dying. I am simply hastening the inevitable." Thornwood reached through the bars and gripped Theron's jaw, forcing him to meet his eyes. "Think carefully about your answer. I am offering you a chance to save the people you love. All you have to do is say yes." Theron met his gaze without flinching. "No." Thornwood released him and stepped back. His expression had not changed, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Very well. We will revisit this conversation after you have had time to consider your position." He turned and walked away. The torch went with him, leaving Theron alone in the darkness. Time passed. Theron could not tell how much. Hours. Perhaps days. The silver chains kept him weak, drifting in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he dreamed of his brother's face. Sometimes he dreamed of his mother, young and smiling, before everything fell apart. Sometimes he dreamed of Seraphina, her green eyes steady in the darkness, her voice telling him to hold on. When the door finally opened again, it was not Thornwood who entered. It was a guard, a young wolf barely older than Cormac, carrying a tray of food and water. His hands trembled as he set the tray down outside the bars. "Eat," the guard said. "Lord Thornwood wants you strong for the ritual." "What ritual?" The guard hesitated. Fear flickered across his face. "The one that will break you. The one that will make you do whatever he commands." He fled before Theron could ask more. The food sat untouched. Theron had no appetite. But the water he drank, knowing he needed to stay hydrated, knowing he needed to preserve whatever strength the silver had not stolen. A ritual to break him. That could mean many things, none of them good. The wolf stirred inside him, weak but still present, still fighting. It had not given up. Neither would he. Hours later, the guards came for him. 6 of them, armed with silver-tipped spears and expressions of wary respect. They unlocked his chains from the wall, but left his wrists bound. They marched him through stone corridors that twisted and turned until they emerged into open air. The camp stretched before him, vast and sprawling. Thousands of wolves moving about their business, unaware or uncaring of the prisoner in their midst. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. They brought him to the clearing at the center of the camp. A circle had been carved into the earth, filled with symbols he recognized from the scrolls Marin had given them. Symbols of binding, symbols of control. Thornwood waited at the edge of the circle. Behind him stood a figure in dark robes, face hidden beneath a hood. A practitioner of forbidden arts, a wielder of the same dark magic that had created the Ravencrest curse. "I gave you a chance to cooperate," Thornwood said. "You refused. Now we do this the hard way. Do what you will. I will not break." "Everyone breaks, Ravencrest. It is simply a matter of finding the right pressure point." He gestured to the guards. They forced Theron to his knees in the center of the circle. The symbols beneath him began to glow with sickly green light. The robed figure stepped forward and began to chant. The words were old, older than the Covenant, older than the first wolves. They scraped against Theron's ears like claws on stone. Pain exploded through him. Not physical pain, though that was there too. This was something deeper, something that reached into his soul and twisted. The curse inside him responded. It surged forward, fed by the ritual, growing stronger with every word the practitioner spoke. Theron felt it clawing at his mind, trying to tear away his will, trying to leave nothing behind but obedience. He fought. He held on to memories, his mother's face, Aldrich's laugh, the quiet strength in Seraphina's eyes, the desperate hope in Cormac's voice, the people he was fighting for, the reasons he could not surrender. The ritual intensified. The pain became a universe, all-encompassing, infinite. Theron screamed. He could not help it. The sound tore from his throat like something dying. And then, in the darkest moment, something unexpected happened. A voice cut through the chaos. Not the practitioner's chant, not Thornwood's commands, a voice he knew. Seraphina. "Now, Cormac, the circle!" An explosion rocked the clearing. The symbols beneath Theron flickered and died. The pain receded like a wave pulling back from shore. He looked up to see chaos erupting around him. Wolves fighting wolves, fire spreading through the camp. And there, cutting through the confusion like a blade through silk, Seraphina and Cormac. They had come back. They had not left him. Seraphina reached him first. Her hands glowed with healing light as she touched his face. "Can you stand?" "I think so." "Then stand, we are leaving." Cormac appeared with a key and unlocked the silver chains. The moment they fell away, Theron felt strength flooding back into his limbs. The wolf surged forward, no longer suppressed, ready to fight. "How?" he asked as they ran. "Your mother," Seraphina said. She knew the old ways. She knew how to disrupt the ritual from outside the circle. She directed us while she was too weak to come herself. "Where is she?" "Safe, hidden in the forest with Mira and the others who chose to fight with us. There are more who oppose Thornwood than he knows. We found them. They found us." They burst through the camp perimeter and into the forest. Behind them, shouting and chaos. Ahead, the darkness and the trees and the promise of escape. Theron ran faster than he had ever run. The wolf and the man moved as one, unified by purpose, driven by something stronger than fear or rage. Hope. They found the others in a cave system half a day's journey from the camp. 24 wolves who had fled Thornwood's tyranny, led by a grizzled old alpha named Ronan, who had lost his pack to the Conqueror years ago. Elena was there, pale and exhausted, but alive. When she saw Theron, tears streamed down her weathered face. "My son, my beautiful boy." He held her carefully, afraid she might break. But she was stronger than she looked. 20 years of imprisonment had not destroyed her spirit. "We need to move," Ronan said. "Thornwood will be hunting us. He will not rest until we are all dead." "Then we make our stand," Theron said. "Not running, not hiding. We face him and end this." "With 24 wolves against 3,000? "With the truth." Theron looked at the faces around him. Seraphina, Cormac, his mother, the refugees who had risked everything to help. Thornwood's power is built on lies and fear. If we can expose him for what he truly is, others will turn against him, others who have suffered under his rule. And if they do not? Then we die fighting, but we do not die running, not anymore. The cave fell silent. Then one by one the wolves around him nodded. They were with him, they believed. And somewhere in the darkness, the wolf inside Theron howled, not in rage or hunger or despair, in defiance. The final battle was coming. Whatever happened, Theron Ravencrest would face it standing. 3 days they spent in the caves, planning and preparing. Theron stood at the entrance, watching the forest below. Somewhere out there, Thornwood's trackers were searching. Somewhere out there, an army waited for orders to march. The peace would not last. It never did. Seraphina joined him as the sun began to set. Her wounds from the rescue had healed, but she moved with a new wariness. The battle had cost her something. It had cost them all something. "The scouts report movement on the eastern road," she said. "Thornwood is pulling his forces back toward Crimson Hollow. He knows that is where we will go. Yes, he is preparing to meet us there." Theron nodded slowly. The protective magic of Crimson Hollow was both his greatest asset and his greatest vulnerability. Without it, Thornwood could march his armies anywhere he pleased. With it, he was forced to confront Theron directly. A siege would be useless against those ancient wards. Only a Ravencrest could open the gates. How many does he have? 3,000 according to Ronan's scouts, maybe more. And we have 24. 26 now. 3 more joined us this morning, refugees from a village Thornwood burned last winter. Theron turned to look at her. In the fading light, her face was all sharp angles and shadows. beautiful in a fierce, uncompromising way. "It is not enough," he said. "No, it is not. But we go anyway. We go anyway." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The wolf inside Theron was quiet, conserving its strength for the battles to come. "There is something I need to tell you," Theron said, "before we face what is coming." Seraphina waited. "When I was in that cell, when Thornwood's ritual was tearing me apart, I held on to something. A memory. A face." He paused, struggling to find the words. "Your face." She did not move, did not speak. "I have spent 10 years believing I deserved nothing. No pack, no purpose, no love. But you came to my ruins looking for a killer, and instead you found—" He shook his head. "I do not know what you found, but whatever it is, I am grateful for it." Seraphina reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were warm and strong. "I found a man," she said quietly. "A man who carries more weight than anyone should have to carry. A man who chains himself in darkness to protect others from his pain. A man who, despite everything, still believes in something worth fighting for." "And is that enough?" She smiled. It was not the cold, calculating smile he had seen before. It was something softer, something real. "It is more than enough." They did not kiss. They did not need to. The understanding between them was deeper than any physical gesture could express. Two broken people who had found each other in the wreckage of their lives. Two wolves who would run together until the end, whatever that end might be. The next morning, they gathered their forces and began the march toward Crimson Hollow. 26 wolves against an empire. It should have felt hopeless. Instead, it felt necessary. Cormac walked beside Theron at the head of the column. The boy had changed since their escape from Thornwood's camp. There was a steadiness in him now, a quiet confidence that had not been there before. "My sister says you are my uncle." The words came without warning. Theron glanced at him sharply. "Mira told you?" She heard Thornwood talking to his lieutenants. "About Aldrich. About me." Cormac's jaw tightened. "Is it true? Was Aldrich Ravencrest my father?" Theron was silent for a long moment. The truth hung between them like a blade waiting to fall. "Yes, Aldrich was your father. He hid you to protect you from the curse that destroyed our family. He never told anyone, not even me." "Why? Why hide his own son?" "Because he loved you. Because he knew that as long as Thornwood hunted our bloodline, any child of Ravencrest would be in danger. He gave you up so that you could live." Cormac walked in silence, processing this. Theron could see the war in his eyes, the anger at being abandoned, the grief for a father he had never known, the complicated pride of belonging to something larger than himself. "The curse," Cormac said finally. "Do I carry it too?" "Perhaps. We will not know until—" Theron stopped himself. "Until the full moon. Until I transform for the first time." "Yes. And if I do carry it? If I become like your father, like Aldrich?" Theron stopped walking. He turned to face the boy, his nephew, his brother's son. "Then I will be there. I will teach you to control it. And if control fails, if the madness takes you as it took them—" He placed a hand on Cormac's shoulder. "I will do what must be done, quickly, mercifully, the way Aldrich asked me to do for him." It was a terrible promise, the kind of promise no one should have to make. But Cormac did not flinch. "Thank you," he said, "for telling me the truth, for not pretending it will be easy. Nothing worth doing is ever easy." They resumed walking. The forest thinned around them as they approached the mountains that ringed Crimson Hollow. Soon they would be home. Soon the final confrontation would begin. Elena rode in a cart near the middle of the column, too weak to walk but too stubborn to stay behind. Mira sat beside her, the young girl who had survived 3 years of captivity with her spirit intact. They had become close during the journey, the old woman and the young girl, finding comfort in each other's company. Theron visited them during a rest stop, bringing water and dried meat. "You should not be here," he told his mother. "This march could kill you." Elena smiled. It was the same smile he remembered from childhood, warm and knowing and utterly unafraid. "I have waited 20 years to see my home again, to see my son become the man he was meant to be. Do you think a little walking will stop me now?" "It is more than a little walking." "Then it is a good death, better than fading away in some cave, forgotten and alone." He could not argue with that. He had thought the same thing himself during those long years in the ruins. Better to die for something than to live for nothing. "There is something I must tell you," Elena said. "Something about your father, about the curse. I have waited too long already, and I may not have another chance." Theron sat down beside the cart. The column continued to move around them, but he barely noticed. His mother's eyes held a weight that demanded attention. "The curse was never meant for destruction," Elena said. "Your father did not understand what he was accepting when Thornwood offered it to him. The power that runs through Ravencrest blood is ancient, older than the Covenant, older than the first wolves. It was meant to protect, not corrupt. But it drove him mad, it drove Aldrich mad, because it was twisted, perverted from its original purpose. Thornwood knew what he was doing when he taught your father the ritual. He deliberately warped the power, turned it against itself, so that it would destroy from within. Can it be restored? Can the corruption be removed?" Elena nodded slowly. "There is a way, but it requires sacrifice, not of life, but of power. The one who breaks the curse must willingly surrender the wolf within them, become fully human again." Theron felt the beast stir inside him, fear, resistance. The wolf did not want to die. "And if I make that sacrifice, what happens?" "The corruption ends, not just in you, but in the entire bloodline. Cormac will never carry the madness. Any children he has will be free of it. The Ravencrest name will be cleansed. But I will no longer be Alpha, no longer be Wolf." "No, you will be a man, just a man. Is that too high a price?" Theron closed his eyes. The beast inside him stirred, listening, understanding. To lose the wolf would be to lose himself. Everything he had been since childhood. The strength that had carried him through darkness, the instinct that had kept him alive. But to keep it would be to risk passing the curse to Cormac, to risk another generation of madness and death. "I will decide after I face Thornwood," he said finally. "One battle at a time." Elena reached out and touched his face with trembling fingers. "You have grown into a good man, Theron. Whatever you choose, I am proud of you." He held her hand for a moment longer, then rose and rejoined the march. The weight of her words settled on his shoulders like a cloak of stone. They reached Crimson Hollow on the 4th day. The keep rose from the mountainside like a broken tooth, its towers crumbling, its walls scarred by time and neglect. But the protective magic still pulsed beneath its stones, a heartbeat of power that Theron could feel in his bones. And surrounding it, stretching across the valley like a sea of steel and flesh, was Thornwood's army. 3,000 wolves, perhaps more. They had fortified their positions with trenches and palisades, turning the approach to the keep into a killing ground. Banners flew above command tents, marking the positions of Thornwood's lieutenants and allies. It was a siege force, patient and overwhelming, designed to starve out any resistance. But they could not breach the walls. That was the one advantage Theron still held. As long as he lived, as long as Ravencrest blood flowed through his veins, the magic would hold. "They cannot touch us inside," Ronan observed, "but we cannot break out either. It is a standoff." "No," Theron said, "it is a challenge." He turned to face his small band of followers. 26 wolves, his mother in her cart, Mira clutching her brother's hand, Seraphina with her blade and her determination. "I am going to end this," he said, "not with a siege, not with a war of attrition. I am going to challenge Thornwood directly, alpha to alpha, according to the old laws." "That is suicide," Ronan said bluntly. "Thornwood has not fought his own battles in 20 years. He sends others to die for him. Then he will refuse, and his own wolves will see him for the coward he is, or he will accept, and I will have my chance. And if he cheats, if he uses his dark magic against you, then I will die knowing I forced him to show his true nature to everyone watching." Seraphina stepped forward, her green eyes blazed with emotion. "I will not let you throw your life away." "I am not throwing it away. I am spending it on something that matters." "There must be another way." "There is not. We both know that." He took her hands in his. "This is why I came back. This is why I stopped hiding. Not to win a war I cannot win, but to stand for something worth standing for. If I die tomorrow, I die as the man I was meant to be, not the monster they tried to make me." Seraphina's eyes glistened, but she did not cry. She was too strong for that. "Then I will be there, watching, and if Thornwood breaks the rules, I will make him pay." "I know you will." That night, they slipped into the keep through the hidden passages Theron had used during his years of isolation. The great hall was still dark and cold, but they built fires in the ancient hearths and drove back the shadows. For one night, Crimson Hollow was alive again. Dawn came gray and cold. Theron stood at the gates of Crimson Hollow as the first light touched the mountains. Behind him, his small force waited. Before him, Thornwood's army stirred to life. He walked forward alone. The soldiers parted before him, wary and uncertain. An alpha walking unarmed into an enemy camp was unprecedented. They did not know whether to attack or flee. Theron stopped in the center of the killing ground, where both armies could see him clearly. He raised his voice, letting the wolf's power carry it across the valley. "Malachar Thornwood, I challenge you, alpha to alpha, according to the old laws that governed our kind before you corrupted them. Face me yourself, or be known forever as a coward who hides behind his soldiers." Silence fell across the valley. Thousands of eyes turned toward the command tent where Thornwood's banner flew. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the tent flap opened, and Malachar Thornwood stepped out. He looked exactly as he had in the camp. Tall and lean, silver hair gleaming, his face arranged in that patient, knowing smile. He walked through his soldiers with the confidence of a man who had never known defeat. Theron Ravencrest, the fallen alpha, the kinslayer. Thornwood's voice carried easily across the distance. "You come to my doorstep and demand a challenge? You who could barely survive my ritual?" "I survived. That is more than you expected." "True. Your resilience is admirable, if futile." Thornwood spread his hands. "Very well. I accept your challenge. Alpha, to the death. But let us make it interesting." He gestured, and his soldiers brought forward 2 prisoners, Cormac, bound in silver chains, and Mira, her face pale but defiant. "When I defeat you," Thornwood said, "these 2 become mine. The boy will open the gates of Crimson Hollow for me. The girl will serve as a reminder of what happens to those who oppose my will." Theron felt the wolf surge inside him, rage and fear and the desperate need to protect. "And if I win? Then they go free. Your pathetic rebellion survives another day, and I retreat with my forces to reconsider my approach." Thornwood smiled. "A generous offer considering the circumstances." "Agreed." The word came out flat and hard. There was no room for negotiation, no room for doubt. Thornwood nodded. He removed his cloak and handed it to a lieutenant. Beneath it, he wore simple fighting clothes, and his body was lean and powerful despite his age. "Shall we begin?" They circled each other in the open ground between the armies. Theron studied his opponent, looking for weaknesses, finding none. Thornwood moved like a predator, smooth and economical, wasting no energy on unnecessary motion. The first attack came fast. Thornwood closed the distance in a blur, his claws raking toward Theron's throat. Theron twisted aside, feeling the wind of the strike across his skin. They exchanged blows, testing each other, measuring speed and strength and skill. Theron was stronger, but Thornwood was faster. Theron had experience, but Thornwood had cunning. Minutes passed. Both men bled from shallow wounds. Neither had gained a clear advantage. Then Thornwood's eyes flickered toward the prisoners, and Theron understood the trap a moment too late. A lieutenant had moved behind Cormac, a silver blade pressed against the boy's throat. "The old laws," Thornwood said, not even breathing hard, "were made for a different age. This age belongs to those who take what they want by any means necessary." Theron's hesitation lasted only a heartbeat, but a heartbeat was enough. Thornwood struck. His claws tore across Theron's chest, opening deep wounds that sprayed blood across the frozen ground. Theron staggered, his vision blurring, his strength fading. Another blow, and another. Thornwood was relentless, pressing his advantage, driving Theron to his knees. "Did you really think you could defeat me?" Thornwood stood over him, blood dripping from his claws. "I have been planning this moment for 40 years. Every move you have made, every choice, every ally you have gathered, all of it was anticipated, all of it was allowed." Theron looked up at his enemy. The wolf inside him was howling, thrashing against its chains, desperate to break free and tear and kill. But the silver wounds had weakened it. The curse was fighting against him, not with him. This was the end. He had failed. And then a voice rang out across the battlefield. "No." Seraphina walked forward from the gates of Crimson Hollow. Her hands glowed with pale blue light, brighter than Theron had ever seen. Her eyes burned with a fire that had nothing to do with magic. "You killed my husband," she said. "You destroyed everything I loved, and now you think you can take him too?" She raised her hands and the light blazed outward. Not healing light, something else, something darker. The battle healer's gift worked both ways. She could mend flesh or destroy it. She could give life or take it, and in this moment she chose to take. Thornwood screamed as the energy tore into him. His flesh withered, his strength drained. He staggered backward, clawing at the air, trying to fight something he could not touch. "Sarah, no." Theron forced himself to his feet. The cost. I know the cost. She did not look at him. Her eyes were fixed on Thornwood, her face twisted with grief and rage and terrible satisfaction. I have been paying it for 3 years. The light intensified. Thornwood fell to his knees, his face aging before their eyes, his power bleeding away. But he was not finished. With a snarl of defiance, he gathered what remained of his dark magic and hurled it at Seraphina. The blast caught her full in the chest, throwing her backward, sending her tumbling across the frozen ground. She did not get up. Theron roared. The sound was not human. It was not wolf. It was something primal, something born from the deepest part of his soul. He charged at Thornwood, wounds forgotten, pain forgotten, everything forgotten, except the need to destroy the creature who had taken so much from him. But Thornwood was ready. He caught Theron's arm and twisted, using his own momentum against him. Theron crashed to the ground, and Thornwood's boot came down on his throat. Enough! Thornwood rasped. He looked ancient now, drained by Seraphina's attack, but still strong enough to kill. This ends now. He raised his clawed hand for the final strike, and Cormac screamed. The boy's chains shattered. Silver links exploded outward, propelled by a force that no one had expected. Cormac stood in the center of the destruction, his eyes blazing gold, his body wreathed in light that pulsed with the heartbeat of Crimson Hollow itself. Ravencrest blood, the protective magic of the keep, the power that Theron had never fully understood. It flowed from Cormac like a river, crossing the distance between them, pouring into Theron's broken body, not healing him but filling him, strengthening him. The power of legacy, the strength of generations. Theron rose. His wounds still bled, his bones still ached. But inside him, the wolf stood tall and proud, no longer fighting against him, no longer twisted by the curse. Man and beast, united for the first time. Thornwood's eyes widened. Fear flickered across his face. That is not possible. The curse. The curse was your weapon, Theron said. Not mine. Never mine. He moved, not with the speed of youth, but with the certainty of a man who had faced every darkness and survived. His claws found Thornwood's chest. His strength drove through bone and muscle and heart. Thornwood gasped. Blood bubbled on his lips. I could have given you everything, he whispered. I already have everything. Theron twisted his hand. Thornwood shuddered once, twice, and was still. The body fell to the ground. The army stood frozen, 3,000 wolves watching their lord die at the hands of a man they had been taught to despise. For a moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, the soldiers began to kneel, not in surrender, in recognition. The old laws still held power. The alpha who killed an alpha claimed his territory. Theron did not care about territory. He turned away from the body and ran to where Seraphina lay. She was breathing, barely. Her face was pale as snow, her heartbeat faint and irregular. The cost of her attack had been high, perhaps too high. Stay with me, he said, gathering her in his arms. Do not leave. Not now. Not after everything. Her eyes fluttered open. She smiled weakly. Did we win? We won. Good. Her eyes closed again. Then I can rest. No resting, not yet, not ever. He carried her through the gates of Crimson Hollow, past the soldiers who parted before him, past the followers who wept with relief and joy. He carried her to the great hall where his mother waited with the healers they had gathered. Save her, he said. Do whatever it takes. Elena looked at her son, at the broken woman in his arms, at the love that burned in his eyes. We will try, she said softly, but some things are beyond our power. Then go beyond. I did not survive all of this to lose her now. They worked through the night. Herbs and poultices, and the old magic that Elena still remembered from her years before imprisonment. Theron sat beside Seraphina's bed, holding her hand, refusing to leave even when exhaustion threatened to pull him under. Cormac came to him near dawn. The boy's face was drawn, aged by what he had experienced. The power he had channeled had taken something from him too. Will she live? I do not know. I am sorry for what I did, for using the magic without understanding it. Theron looked at him. This boy who was his brother's son, this nephew he had never known, this heir to a legacy of pain and power. You saved my life. You have nothing to apologize for. I felt it, Cormac said quietly. When the power flowed through me, I felt the connection to this place, to you, to everyone who came before. He paused. I understand now why you carry the weight you carry. It is not just guilt. It is responsibility. Yes, I want to learn. I want to be worthy of the name I carry. You already are. Theron reached out and gripped the boy's shoulder. But I will teach you anyway. Everything I know, everything my father should have taught me. We will not repeat the mistakes of the past. Cormac nodded. For a moment he looked like he wanted to say more. Then he simply squeezed Theron's hand and left. 3 days later, Seraphina opened her eyes. The sun was setting, painting the chamber in shades of gold and rose. Theron sat where he had sat since the battle, haggard and unshaven, his wounds bandaged but still painful. You look terrible, she whispered. He laughed. It was the first time he had laughed in weeks. You nearly died. So I have been told. She tried to sit up, winced, and settled back against the pillows. Thornwood? Dead. His army? Scattered. Some have sworn loyalty to me, others have fled to the borderlands. The threat is over. She was quiet for a moment, processing this. And the curse? Theron hesitated. He had not performed the ritual yet, had not made the final choice. The scrolls still sat on his desk, waiting. I have to give up the wolf, he said, to break it forever, to protect Cormac and anyone who comes after. That is a heavy price. Yes, and you are afraid. He looked at her. At this woman who saw through him so easily, who knew him better than he knew himself. I have been a wolf my entire life. Without it, I do not know who I am. Seraphina reached out and took his hand. You are the man who chained himself in darkness to protect others, the man who faced an army alone to save 2 children, the man who carried me back from death when anyone else would have given up. She squeezed his fingers. The wolf is not who you are. It is just a part of what you can do. He closed his eyes. The beast inside him stirred, listening, understanding. Will you be there when I perform the ritual? Where else would I be? They performed the ceremony 3 nights later, beneath the full moon, in the courtyard of Crimson Hollow, where Ravencrest wolves had gathered for generations. Elena led the ritual, her voice steady despite her weakness. Cormac stood witness, along with Mira and Ronan, and the wolves who had chosen to stay. Theron knelt in the center of the circle, the ancient symbols glowing around him. The curse stirred inside him, resisting, fighting. The wolf howled its defiance. But Theron did not fight back. He did not resist. He simply opened himself, let go of the fear and the pride and the desperate clinging to power. The pain was immense. It felt like dying, like being torn apart and remade into something new. When it was over, he lay on the cold stones, gasping. His body felt strange, lighter, different. The wolf was gone. He sat up slowly, expecting to feel diminished, expecting to feel lost. Instead, he felt clear, clean, as if a fog he had not even noticed had finally lifted from his mind. The constant struggle between man and beast that had defined his entire existence was simply gone. In its place was silence, peace. How do you feel? Seraphina asked, kneeling beside him. Human, he said, completely human. And is that enough? He looked at her, at the moonlight on her face, at the love in her eyes, at the woman who had walked through darkness to find him and stayed to build something new. It is more than enough. She helped him to his feet. His legs were unsteady, but they held. Around them, the wolves who had witnessed the ritual stood in respectful silence. They had watched their leader give up everything that made him powerful, and they understood the magnitude of what he had done. Cormac approached, his young face solemn. How do you feel, Uncle? Like a man who has finally put down a weight he has been carrying his entire life. Theron smiled. Like someone who is ready to live instead of just survive. The weeks that followed were filled with rebuilding. Crimson Hollow had been neglected for too long. Walls needed repair, roofs needed replacement. The Great Hall needed to become a home again instead of a tomb. Wolves came from across the territories. Some were refugees, fleeing the chaos of Thornwood's fallen empire. Some were exiles, drawn by rumors of an alpha who had sacrificed his power for something greater than himself. Some were simply lost, looking for a place to belong. Theron welcomed them all, not as a lord accepting subjects, but as a man offering shelter to those who needed it. Elena passed away on the quiet afternoon in late spring. She died in her bed, surrounded by family, with a smile on her face and peace in her heart. I am proud of you, she whispered to Theron in her final moments. More proud than I can ever say. I wish I had known you longer. I wish we had more time. We had enough. We had this. She touched his face with trembling fingers. That is more than I ever dared to hope. They buried her in the family crypt. beside the empty tomb that had held her memory for 20 years. Theron stood at the graveside long after everyone else had gone, thinking about all the things she had taught him, all the wisdom she had shared in their brief time together. The curse was broken. The war was over. The future stretched before him, uncertain but full of possibility. He was no longer a wolf, no longer an alpha, just a man, getting older, trying to build something good from the ruins of something terrible. And somehow that was enough. Summer came to Crimson Hollow. The fields that had lain fallow for a decade burst into green. Children played in the courtyards where soldiers had once drilled. Laughter echoed through halls that had known only silence. Theron stood at the window of his chamber, watching the valley come alive. Below, wolves worked in the gardens, clearing debris that had accumulated over 10 years of neglect. Others repaired the outer walls, filling cracks with mortar, rebuilding what time had torn down. Seraphina joined him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "What are you thinking?" "That I never believed this was possible, any of it." He turned to face her. "A home, a family, a future. And now? Now I believe in everything." They were married in the great hall that first summer, surrounded by the wolves who had become their family. The ceremony was simple, as both of them preferred. No grand speeches, no elaborate rituals, just vows spoken in quiet voices, witnessed by those who mattered. Cormac stood as witness. Mira threw flowers she had gathered from the meadow. Ronan grumbled about ceremonies being a waste of time, but wept openly during the vows. Even the hardest warriors softened when they saw true love take root in soil that had known only pain. That night, Theron and Seraphina sat together by the fire, their hands intertwined. "I never thought I would have this," he said. "After everything. After Aldrich. After the years alone." "Neither did I." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "After Gareth died, I thought my heart had died with him. I thought I would spend the rest of my life hunting shadows and nursing vengeance. What changed? You did. You showed me that grief does not have to be an ending. It can be a doorway, a passage to something new." He kissed the top of her head. "We saved each other." "Yes, we did." 15 years passed. Crimson Hollow became what Theron had always hoped it could be. Not a fortress of war, but a sanctuary of peace. Wolves came from every corner of the territories, drawn by stories of the Alpha who had broken his own curse. Cormac grew into his role with a grace that surprised everyone. He trained with the young wolves, teaching them control and discipline. He became, day by day, the leader his father Aldrich might have been, if fate had been kinder. At 32, he was everything Theron had hoped he would become. On the anniversary of Thornwood's defeat, Cormac stood before the gathered pack and made his declaration. "I am Cormac Ravencrest, son of Aldrich, nephew of Theron. I claim my place in this line not by right of blood, but by choice. I choose to protect. I choose to serve." The wolves howled their acceptance. Theron watched from the side, his hair now fully white, his heart full. Mira found her own path. The years of captivity had left scars, but they had also given her strength. She became a healer, her hands, which had known so much pain, learning to bring comfort instead. New children were born, the first generation to grow up without the shadow of the curse. They played in the courtyards and ran through the forests, their laughter echoing off ancient stones that had known too much grief. Theron watched them with wonder. This was what it had all been for. Not victory, not vengeance. This. Winter came early in Theron's 60th year. The snows piled high against the walls. Inside the keep, fires blazed and stories were told. Theron sat by the great hearth, a blanket across his knees. His body had grown old. His hair was white. His hands trembled, but his mind remained clear and his heart remained full. Seraphina sat beside him, as she always did. Her own hair had silvered, but to him she was still beautiful, still fierce, still his. "Do you remember the first time we met?" she asked. "You came to kill me." "I came to find answers. Killing you was secondary." He laughed. The sound was weaker than it used to be, but it was genuine. "I never thanked you," he said, "for staying, for believing. You thanked me every day, in the way you looked at me, in the way you built this place." She took his hand. "That is all the thanks I ever needed." "Cormac came to see me this morning. He wants to take a mate." "A good match," Mira said. "Yes, the bloodline continues." Seraphina smiled. "The future is secure. Is that not what you wanted?" "No. What I wanted was to stop being afraid, to find peace." He looked at her. I found all of that and more. Spring came late that year, but it came. The snows melted, the fields turned green. The pack emerged from their winter shelter and began the work of another season. Theron walked the walls of the keep, slowly, carefully, his joints protesting every step. But he still walked. He would walk until his legs gave out entirely. It was important to see, to witness, to remember. From the battlements, he could see the entire valley, the villages that had grown up around the keep, the farms that fed the pack, the roads that connected them to the wider world, all of it built on the foundation of sacrifice and hope. Cormac found him there, staring out at the horizon. "You should be resting," the young man said. "I will rest when I am dead, and not a moment before." Cormac smiled. He had his father's smile, Theron had realized over the years. Aldrich's smile, bright and warm and full of life. "The council wants to speak with you about the alliance with the northern packs." "What do they want my opinion for? You are the alpha now." "You are still the one they respect, the one who taught us all." Theron turned to face his nephew, this man who had grown from a frightened boy into a leader worthy of the name, this heir who carried no curse, no corruption, only the pure potential of what their bloodline could have always been. "Then tell them this," Theron said. "Alliances are built on trust. Trust is built on action. Show them who you are through what you do, not what you say. The rest will follow." Cormac nodded. He turned to go, then paused. "Uncle, there is something I have never said, something I should have said years ago." "What is it?" "Thank you. For saving me. For teaching me. For giving me a family when I thought I had lost everything." His voice cracked slightly. "Thank you for being the father I never knew." Theron felt his eyes sting. He reached out and pulled his nephew into an embrace. "You were worth it," he said. "Every moment of pain, every sacrifice, you were worth all of it." They stood there for a long time, uncle and nephew, the past and the future, bound together by blood and choice and love. The summer of Theron's 61st year was warm and golden. The pack celebrated the solstice with feasting and games, and Cormac announced that his mate was expecting their first child. Theron sat in his usual place by the hearth, watching the celebration with quiet contentment. His body had grown weaker over the winter. He knew that his time was drawing near, but there was no fear in that knowledge, only acceptance. Seraphina sat beside him, her hand in his, as it had been for so many years. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Yes." "Even now, even knowing that?" "Especially now." He squeezed her hand. "I have had more than I ever dreamed, more than I ever deserved. To ask for more would be greedy." She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. They had grown old together, these two who had met in violence and found each other in the darkness. They had built a life from the wreckage of their pasts. They had loved and been loved, and that was enough. "I am not ready to lose you," she whispered. "You will never lose me. I will be here, in these stones, in these people, in every life that flourishes because we chose to fight." He kissed her forehead. "Death is not an ending. It is just another door." Autumn came, painting the forests in shades of gold and red. Theron walked less now. His legs had finally begun to give out, as he had always known they would. But he still sat by the window, watching the world turn, feeling the rhythm of life flow around him. On the last day, he gathered his family, Seraphina, Cormac, Mira, the wolves who had become his pack, his purpose, his legacy. "I have one more story to tell," he said, his voice thin but clear. "The story of a man who thought he was a monster, who spent 10 years hiding from the world because he was afraid of what he might become." They listened, as they always listened. "That man was wrong," Theron continued. "He was not a monster. He was just afraid. Afraid of his own power, afraid of his own heart, afraid of loving anything because he knew how easily it could be lost." He paused, gathering his strength. But then he learned something. He learned that love is not weakness. It is the only strength that matters. He learned that sacrifice is not surrender. It is the highest form of victory. And he learned that the measure of a life is not in the power we wield, but in the lives we touch. His eyes moved across the faces before him, the family he had built, the future he had secured, the love that had saved him when nothing else could. "I am proud of all of you," he said. "More proud than I can ever say. You have given my life meaning. You have given my death purpose. I could ask for nothing more." Seraphina took his hand. Her eyes were wet, but she did not look away. "We love you," she said. "We will always love you." "I know," he smiled, "and that is the greatest gift anyone could ever receive." He closed his eyes. The sounds of the keep faded, the warmth of the fire dimmed, and somewhere, in the distance, he heard a wolf howling. Not a wolf of rage or hunger or madness, a wolf of welcome. He walked toward it, and the darkness became light. The end.